Hello guys! So in today's video we will be looking at the Gandalf Gambit opening, the first gambit I ever created, and how to play it with white pieces. So just to remind you what the Gandalf Gambit looks like, maybe you haven't seen it yet. If that's the case, I highly recommend you to watch my Gandalf Gambit video on my channel. But basically we want to enter this modern Scandinavian, and on move 3, if your opponent decides to protect his pawn with the c4 move, here you can offer your e-pawn, and after they capture, this is known to be Icelandic pawn gambit, and the theory goes around capturing this way. But here I like to play a simple developing move, bishop to c5. So we get our little Gandalf on the board. Do you see him? The point of this opening is that we want them to capture our f-pawn, make us move our king, which looks pretty dumb at first, but the point is that in this position we have a tremendous lead in the development, and yes, white is winning because he's up 2 pawns, but actually there is only one correct move for white to play in this position. So if we turn on the engine, you can see some really natural looking moves like knight to c3 are losing blunders, or bishop to e2, or stuff like queen to f3. Everything is losing except maybe pawn to d3 or pawn to d4, but there are traps in those lines. So the only move is knight to f6 here. For more information about the traps in the Gandalf Gambit, I recommend you to watch my 1 hour long analysis. Let me just now talk about how to get this position with white pieces. So it's not so simple actually, but there is way. And you have to play the Anderson's opening and start with a3. So you need to waste a move at the start, and you need your opponent to play e5, which is luckily the most played move after 1a3. It also works with a4, but a3 is more useful later in the game, you will see. So after this you can play d4, so you go for a Scandinavian defense with your white pieces, and knight to f3, it's a modern Scandinavian with white pieces, and here the most played move is knight to f6, I mean, what is it, knight to c6, and the second move is pawn to c5, which is what we are looking at. If your opponent plays knight to c6, you don't have to, but you can go for this exchange in the middle, and actually here knight to f6 and pawn to d5 are the most played moves, and that would lead actually to a Xena attack with white pieces. Another opening which is on my channel, very nasty and tricky. But the second most played move is pawn to c5, and after that you can offer your e-pawn, or almost everybody here takes this pawn, and after that you develop your bishop to c4, and usually they capture also the f-pawn. So we basically reach the same position, but the difference is that now our pawn is on a3. And all the traps actually work pretty much the same in this opening. So if we turn on the engine, here you will see that, for example, bishop to e2 is a losing mistake, knight to c6 is a losing mistake, and queen to f6 as well. And all the other kind of pawn pushes, this is like maybe the worst one, or even this is really bad. So if they want to push a pawn, they need to push this pawn. But if you check out my video, you will see some nasty traps. Alright, so their only move is knight to f6 here. And I'm going to show you a game that I played yesterday, I guess. So around half of my opponents, when I played the Gandalf for with black pieces, they find this move, the only move, and the other half is going to blunder on move 6. So that's pretty cool. So this guy played the correct move, knight to f6. In that case, I go knight to c3. And then he also plays the correct move, and that's bishop to e7. So you see, with the Gandalf gambit, your opponent needs to play these careful developing moves. Just develop this knight and this bishop in this order and quickly castle, and that's the way to play against the Gandalf gambit. But a lot of times people get really greedy and they just simply think that I'm just some kind of noob playing this accident bond cloud, or how to say this, and they will try to crush me, punish me, checkmate me, my exposed king, and that is not going to work for them at all. So after bishop to e7, I like to play this knight to d5, hitting the bishop, hitting this knight, and this pretty much kind of forces them to capture the knight. But after that, I get to recapture with my queen, and now my queen is on d5, which is the desired square for my queen, with this nice battery aiming at f7. So here my opponent just castled to get out of trouble. This is perfectly fine for him, and in this position I like to play a rook to e1 to get to this nice open file. And you know what? My opponent here once again played correctly and just developed his knight to c6. So actually the correct moves here are knight to c6 or d6. And here I continued with this little silent killer move, king to g1. So this sets a nasty trap, which is kind of hard to foresee for your opponent. But the idea is that I want my king away from the f file, because once this pawn gets somewhere else, then this rook has a potential to check my king, which is not something that I want. And here in this position, actually black needs to be careful. Black needs to play something like pawn to d6, but my opponent played rook to b8. So yeah, his plan with this move is kind of obvious. He wants to push this pawn to disturb my bishop, but this is just a too slow of a move. Too slow to not get punished, because basically it didn't cover what my opponent should have covered last move. And now actually knight to g5 is very strong, and like 90% of your opponents are just going to grab this knight, because yes, you have these three pieces attacking f7 and they want to just get rid of one of them at least. So they usually capture this knight, but this is now a totally losing position, because after I recaptured with my bishop, the queen is hit. The queen cannot come to the e file due to this rook. And actually, it is so bad for black that the queen cannot be moved at all. It needs to be lost. But, you know, it's hard to see for my opponent. My opponent just played queen to b6, just getting away from the attack, now attacking this. And yeah, the black king looks very safe behind this wall of pawns and the rook. But this is actually a position where white have a checkmate in two moves. And if you don't want to find it for yourself, I will just show you. It is the amazing queen captures on f7. Ta-da! So the thing is, they cannot move their king away because this is checkmate, but they also cannot capture the queen because this is checkmate. And one more thing that I wanted to talk about is that actually, let's go back. Thanks to this move, pawn to a3, the Gandalf the white is actually slightly better version of the Gandalf gambit, because if you play Gandalf with black pieces, and just imagine that now the colors are flipped and this pawn is back on its root square, let's just say that you continue with king to g1 here, so setting your trap. Here actually playing with black pieces, white has the move knight to b4. or in that case it would be knight to b5. And it is a strong move which kind of ruins your trap, and it actually makes your position pretty bad, losing actually. So that's why I like to play this Gandalf with white pieces, because now they don't have this option. Alright guys, so I think that's it for this video. I hope you learned something. I hope you like White Gandalf. Stay safe, take care, and goodbye. Oh, also have fun.